the 15th of July, and Moscow city is under attack. An emergency evacuation of the business center is starting right now. Thousands of employees are fleeing their workplaces. Donald Trump suggested that Zelenskyy strike Moscow and St. Petersburg. At this very moment, Moscow City is switching its employees to remote work. Only security and a couple of staff remain in VTB's central office. All this is happening against the backdrop of drone attacks and the threat of direct hits on the towers. American JASSM missiles and possibly Tomahawks will be launched at the Kremlin. Breaking news, friends, the 15th of July, Moscow City is under attack. An emergency evacuation of the business center is starting right now. Thousands of employees are fleeing their workplaces. Trump has authorized strikes on Moscow and St. Petersburg. Both Moscow and the Moscow region are being attacked by Ukrainian drones. Boom, bada boom. Donald Trump privately suggested to Zelenskyy to strike Moscow and St. Petersburg. The new US president is convinced only strikes on Russian cities will force the Kremlin to come to the negotiating table. At this very moment, Moscow City is switching its employees to remote work. Only security and a couple of duty staff remain in the central VTB office. All this is happening against the backdrop of new drone attacks and the threat of direct hits on the towers. That's it. This is a new phase of the war. And we are seeing Russia truly afraid for the first time. What kind of signal did Trump send? What missiles might be given to Ukraine, JASSM or Tomahawks? Why is Putin running and why is Moscow trembling? We'll discuss all this with top analyst Alexander Demchenko right now. Breaking news, friends, the 15th of July. And Trump asks Zelenskyy, why aren't you striking Moscow? Zelensky's response, we can't just give us the weapons. Trump, as we understand it, says, we will. The US responds, long-range missiles will be included in the JASSM package with a range of 1,000 kilometers. Tomahawks are being discussed. Europe pays, the US supplies, and Ukraine takes aim. Moscow City has been sent to work remotely, preparing for strikes. Trump has given Putin 50 days to surrender or else face 100% tariffs and attacks. 17 Patriot systems are heading to Ukraine. This is an ultimatum which could be followed by a wave of strikes on Moscow and St. Petersburg. The final attempt by Putin to maintain control has begun and possibly the last one in this cycle of the war. We'll discuss all of this with the well-known top analyst Alexander Demchenko. Sasha, welcome.
Hello, Dasha. Hello, everyone.
Friends, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Sasha and I work together twice a week on my YouTube channel, and in the comments, let us know how you rated Trump's press conference, his statements, and what you think will happen next. Sasha, the most important question, what happens now?
A strike on Moscow. In the coming days, Moscow is preparing. It's not for nothing that Moscow City is being evacuated. Everyone is being sent to work remotely. It's not for nothing that official Z-bloggers, war correspondents, even the authorities, the military and generals have started saying that, yes, there will be a combined strike here, missile and drone, attack directly on Moscow. In other words, they are preparing for retaliation, for a harsh response. We discussed with you literally this week that a harsh response is expected any day now. I said before, wait 10 days, there will be a response. There you go. Trump gave 50 days, but I gave 10. And as you can see, I was right. I assessed the situation a bit more accurately, perhaps, than even Donald Trump. That's just a little joke, Dasha. The point is, there will be a response, there will be a harsh strike. Moscow is preparing for this. Most likely, for the first time, Moscow will be set ablaza those patriarchs. All of Rubliovka will burn. They don't feel the war there, you see? Many people here ask me, but Kyiv is being hit very often. Representatives of the Russian political immigration, the immigrants, ask me this question. Kyiv is being hit, but Kyiv keeps functioning, standing, living, and so on. I say yes. But Kyiv feels that the war has long since come to Ukrainian capital. But Moscow doesn't feel that yet. Now they will feel it 100%, everyone will feel it. Dmitry Medvedev, who, after getting drunk, started talking about how Trump is decorative with his statements. Well, the only one who is decorative is Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev himself, both in terms of height, intellectual abilities, and in how he managed to drink away power in a single night. And in his cowardice, he is decorative as well. And especially in how much he is sucking up to Putin now, afraid that he'll get taken out. Twitter this way, Twitter that way. You see what I mean? One moment he criticizes Trump, the next he praises him. It all depends on Vladimir Putin's mood. This is a man who drank away his power in a single night and handed it over to Putin and Patrushev by the lake, giving up his authority in one night because he was afraid they'd drown him. In just one night. And now he talks about being decorative. There is no one more decorative in the Russian power structure than Dmitry Medvedev. This is something you can just remember for the rest of your life. Just carve it in stone for yourself, wherever you like. That's the first thing. Second, of course, is that now they're moving not just military enterprises to remote work, you see, but Moscow City, the elite complex with office spaces where Viktor Yanukovych's son has offices, where Kurchenko has offices, where a huge number of Russian security officials and FSB officers have offices, where Bashar Assad and his family have an apartment. This suggests that most likely they're going to shoot things down, they want to shoot things down, and they don't care where they do it. It's obvious that their goal is to prevent drones from hitting the Kremlin or any other important military targets or military facilities, like the general staff on Frunzenskaya near Arbatwell. It's actually right on Arbat. In other words, what we've been talking about and predicting with you over the past weeks or even months is starting to come true. Many people thought maybe that we were crazy, just making things up. Well, here, Yugono drones and missiles will be flying. It's not just Daria and I saying this. They're saying this over there in Russia. Gerasimov is saying it. The whole propaganda pack is announcing it. Everyone, absolutely everyone. Go ahead. Moscow will say whatever Trump says. Why aren't you striking Moscow? You said it right in the preview. Why aren't you striking Moscow? There are no weapons. Give us weapons and we'll strike. All right. But then don't just strike Moscow, hit St. Petersburg too. In other words, the Americans are raising the stakes. It's just that Putin went all in and Trump thought, well, fine, but I've got more Trump cards. My last name literally means Trump. So why don't I play my own hand? And he did. Now he's already considering giving Ukraine Tomahawk. And that's the weapon that pierced through 2 nuclear facilities in Iran. Tomahawks, 30 Tomahawks on, there were no more nuclear plants in Iran. So why do we assume there couldn't be several nuclear plants in Russia destroyed after a Tomahawk strike? Now, JASSMs, air-to-air missiles, and ballistic missiles will be sent here to Ukraine. And we're saying that most likely Donald Trump gave a signal, quite a public one, that's showing everything openly, demonstrating it all to Vladimir Putin in 50 days, or perhaps even exactly 50 days. Just as it was with the US-Israeli agreement, yes, the arrangement now too in 50 days, catastrophic strikes on Moscow will follow. And now there will be combined strikes, drone attacks and missile strikes. But in 50 days, they will simply turn off the lights over Moscow and over Russia as well. And the lights will go out over Vladimir Putin's regime too. It's long overdue. And if even Trump is asking, why aren't you striking? Then it means he's already come up with the idea most likely, 100%, that maybe it's time to make things unpleasant for Vladimir Putin. I'm sure that's the bet that's been placed. So I'm expecting a major fire in the center of Moscow in the near future. Everything will burn, absolutely everything, and that's already inevitable. They brought this disaster into their own home themselves when they started the war. They brought this disaster into their own home themselves when they once again chose Vladimir Putin, when they helped him dismantle the constitution, when they helped him orchestrate Bucha, Hostomel, Irpin, Troshenets, Mariupol, and the rest of the list. They are the ones to blame for all of this. They brought a nightmare upon themselves. Now it won't just be hellish sanctions. Now it will be hell on earth. Trump had promised hell on earth for Iran, but it actually turned out that hell on earth came instead to Vladimir Putin himself.
Friends, write in the comments what you think about the potential transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. That really would be a true game changer. Write what you think about the JASSM and about the phone call between Zelenskyy and Trump when Trump basically asked, why aren't you striking Moscow? President Zelenskyy replied, we have nothing to strike with. And now Trump is giving them something to strike with. Sasha, let me add a bit of a fly in the ointment to our barrel of honey. Military analysts reacted very harshly to the phrase 50 days sanctions. That is, the Senate was ready to impose them already at the end of July. So any day now. Now, all the American media have reported that the Senate is postponing it because 50 days means the beginning of September. And many military analysts immediately wrote that Trump simply allowed Putin to seize the entire Donbass during these 50 days to continue his military actions, his offensive, expansionist, terrorist operation, and only after that would he introduce any measures. In other words, there was some kind of agreement between Trump and Putin. Here are 50 days for you, take what you need, and then we'll impose sanctions. What do you think?
Dasha, you see, that's not how it works. If there had been a deal between Trump and Putin, the NATO Secretary General wouldn't have been in Washington. There wouldn't have been any negotiations between the Europeans and Trump. Keith Kellogg wouldn't have been in Kyiv. You see, none of this would be happening these days, and no one would be giving anything to Ukraine. A backroom deal is arranged in a completely different way. Why 50 days? I can explain 3 specific reasons why it's 50 days. First, a shipment of weapons needs to arrive. Let me remind you, Trump gave Iran 60 days. On the 61st day, the Israelis launched a strike. But in order to carry out that strike, everything had to arrive first, including the American aircraft carrier. The groups had to approach the American fighters, the American reconnaissance planes, and the American intelligence data all had to be in place. And the intelligence services had to work to figure out who was where, how they were positioned, and in which bunker Ayatollah Khomeini was hiding. It's the same situation here. 50 days are given to prepare, to stockpile weapons, to accumulate systems, to acquire anti-missile systems, and then to carry out strikes, retaliatory strikes in response to what Vladimir Putin will do. 50 days, yes, of course Putin will strike. Obviously, he will try to advance in the Donbass. These are obvious things, Dasha. But you see, this idea that Putin will take the entire Donbass in 50 days, well, I'm definitely not a military expert or a military analyst. But to me, these things are obvious. But in 3.5 years of war, Putin hasn't managed to seize the Donbass. And in fact, since 2014, he hasn't been able to take the Donbass. Why do we think he'll be able to do it in 50 days? That's the first point. Second, obviously, it's necessary to reach an agreement with India and with China. Because right now, Trump is negotiating with both the Indians and the Chinese. And these negotiations are about tariffs. And here, the issue is trade. Lavrov came to Beijing after visiting North Korea, as you know. Right now, Lavrov is in Beijing and he's negotiating with Xi Jinping. And the Chinese side said that they would support Russia even more. Well, that's all well and good if they support more. They'll get sanctions. But we're not talking about sanctions against Russia. We're talking about secondary sanctions against China, against India, against the purchasing countries, against companies and legal entities that buy oil, gas, nuclear materials, electricity, coal, and so on from Russia. That's what we're talking about, secondary sanctions. We're talking about measures against the purchasing countries, the countries that allow the Russian oil fleet to sell everything under the sun and to roam freely. Those that directly, Dasha, enable certain financial transactions and allow goods to pass through their territories. Turkey, for example, Azerbaijan, Central Asia, China as well, and so on down the list. That's what we're talking about, right? About certain countries of the European Commonwealth. That's what we're talking about. That's why there are 50 days for negotiations, so that everyone understands and makes their choice. Which side would they officially and finally take? So that the rules of the game are clear to everyone. And third, listen, in September, the official procedure for adopting the federal state budget begins. We need to understand whether Vladimir Putin will make any moves or not. What appropriations, what funds to allocate, what to allocate them for, how much to allocate to Ukraine specifically to counter Putin. What will Putin do? It's necessary to assess the behavior of the Kremlin dictator, the Russian troops and so on right now. What will happen next? Once they assess it, they will strike. There is simply no other way out of this situation. Vladimir Putin himself overturned this board. I think he now deeply regrets it. He's biting his nails and elbows and everything, biting everything he can. But the problem is, Dasha, that he is the one to blame for this whole story. He overdid it. He ruined everything. As the New York Times correctly put it. Now, very difficult, catastrophic times await Putin. There's another reason as well, Dash. Putin started defending his elite at the wrong time. He killed the Minister of Transport, Starovwa. He went after the Shemezov clan, who until recently was his friend. He started once again to go after the Shoigu and Patrushev clans and so on. He started cracking down again. And the scale of this repression is gaining more and more momentum. He began destroying his own elite at the wrong time, because right now the elite should be united. And when half of the elite fears for their lives, when ministers, 9 people vote with their feet, vice premiers, ministers, and top officials vote with their feet and come to Starovwa's funeral, while Putin mocks them, first saying that a wreath was sent, then taking his words back. And they understand that now, well, fine, now Lubyanka will come after their asses too. So what we're talking about is that there will be pressure from Trump, an economic crisis in Russia, a mess, and at the same time, possibly the beginning of some kind of coup. Because the oligarchs who are feeding these ministers, the officials, the military leadership, they all understand perfectly well that Putin started the fight, that Putin was the first to strike at them. If they don't respond, they're finished. Now Trump will apply pressure, and they will apply pressure, and they will destabilize the situation. I don't know, Dasha, whether we'll wake up tomorrow or the day after to the news that tanks have entered Moscow and surrounded the Kremlin, and Putin is gone coup d'etat in Russia. Hooray! I don't know. But the fact that they will act and watch how hard Trump goes after Putin and base their actions on that, that's a fact. These 50 days are probably one of the most turbulent periods of this war, the tension of this war. It won't be easy. It will be turbulent. And at times it will be tough. But for Putin, ultimately, these 50 days will end badly. These are fateful days for the war, for Ukraine, yes? But these are dark and grim days for Vladimir Putin. Trump has no other way. To use Margarita Simonian's words, he can't back down. He simply can't anymore. And Putin will choke on him. And this is Vladimir Putin's fault. He's the one to blame for what happened.
Sasha, are Tomahawk missiles a reality in the coming months, or is that still unrealistic for now?
This is Trump raising the stakes. This is Putin blackmail.
Yes.
Well, Trump showed him several times what the Tomahawk system is, what Tomahawk missiles are. He demonstrated this once in Syria when he destroyed and simply smashed to pieces the Syrian bases of Russia, where there were Russian military and Russian aircraft. He showed what American weapons are capable of, using the example of the Wagner mercenaries, whom he also wiped out. He demonstrated what Tomahawks are using Iran as an example. And now he says, that's it, I will send Tomahawks to both Zelenskyy and Ukraine. Hundreds of them. Take your pick. In other words, he's raising the stakes. Yes, he's raising the stakes, but he doesn't want the war to truly turn into a global large-scale one. He doesn't want to fight Putin directly, but he probably has to do it or will have to do it. But for now, he's raising the stakes as much as possible to the absolute limit. Trump has a higher ceiling of possibilities. He has a broader range of maneuver, you see. He's showing Putin, I can even provide Tomahawks. And you don't have any, you have nothing to counter these Tomahawks. The Patriots are mine. Those are my Patriots. I have the best anti-missiles, and you don't have them. If there has already been a strike on Siberia, and Siberia was burning, I don't know, for the second or third time in the past month, Dasha. You see, before Russia's vast territory was in such a huge expanse, you could hardly make it all the way through, right? You'd get as far as the Urals, and then somewhere beyond that, you just give up and turn back home. Now, Russia's vast territory is actually a disadvantage. It's a negative factor because it's impossible to cover it with anti-drone systems, with anti-missile systems, you see. It's impossible. So once again, they'll protect Putin somewhere behind him near the Kremlin, while all of Moscow will be burning. They'll protect St. Petersburg, and Siberia will be burning. Do you understand? So Tomahawks are a realistic prospect for the future. After 50 days, when Putin says no to everything, and most likely, he will say no. He has no other option left. He can't show any weakness. He can't let his security forces, on whom he depends, the very foundation of his power, see that he's chickened out, that he can't do it. He will go all the way. He will keep making mistake after mistake. But Trump will keep pushing further and further, together with the Europeans and everyone else. Ultimately, we will reach a situation where China will have to get directly and openly involved. Directly and openly involved. And we're already approaching that situation. The only question is, will it happen within these 50 days or after some other unspecified amount of time?
Yes, everyone has already written that Sevastopol is starting to heat up. Pro-Russian public pages in occupied Crimea are writing that Trump might strike Sevastopol with JASSM missiles replacing Tomahawks. They say it's also on the brink. Latest comments, Trump is considering supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. They could hit Moscow and St. Petersburg. Panic is starting in the Kremlin. Propagandists are already howling. So this is exactly the zone of tension that is now rapidly developing in Russian military public pages. Would you agree?
And notice, Dasha, Trump hasn't actually supplied anything yet. You see, that's a skill in itself too. He hasn't done anything yet. But the Moscow exchange is already starting to fall. He hasn't done anything yet. And the public pages are already howling. He hasn't done anything yet. And already half of Moscow is being evacuated in Russia. He hasn't done anything yet. And already there's a problem starting in Crimea. And there aren't even any Tomahawks yet. And now, attention, imagine, friends, the situation. There are Tomahawks and the Tomahawks are being launched. Just multiply all of this hysteria, by 10 or by 100, multiply it, and they'll go insane. They don't even exist yet. And they're already starting to talk about how it's all just for show. And when they do exist, honestly, I don't know, they'll all just disappear. As soon as the Tomahawks start flying toward Moscow, the very first person who won't be in Moscow is Dmitry Anatolievich Medvedev. He'll fly away. And that's already happened before. You're laughing, Dasha, but that's how it was. When Prigozhin was marching on Moscow through the Rostov region, who was the first to run away? Everyone else stayed. No one understood what was happening. Everyone stayed put. Everyone was scared. Who ran away? Putin and Medvedev. Putin and Medvedev. Putin took Medvedev by the hand because the constitution says that in case anything happens, Medvedev also gets a lifetime term, that he has immunity. Medvedev is the only president who has immunity. Besides Putin, Medvedev. He took Medvedev by the hand like a bride and flew off with him in some unknown direction to some kind of bunker. And this time, as soon as Tomahawks or something else start flying toward Moscow or anywhere else, Medvedev will immediately disappear. He'll be gone right away because everything about Dmitry Medvedev is just for show.
That's it.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Sasha, did you notice how, the NATO Secretary General really trolled and mocked Medinsky during the negotiation process they were discussing with Trump? That was pretty harsh. So Trump was trying to explain, like, I called Putin and Putin says everything is fine. Then my wife Melania says they're bombing Kyiv. So what's so good about that? But I believed him. And then NATO Secretary General Rutte says to him, how can you believe them if they send Medinsky to spout some nonsense, some pseudo-historical nonsense about Russia?
No, what they actually said was that Putin sent some crazy historian who started talking about the history of Russia, beginning from the year 1245. So obviously Trump at some point, someone told him about Medinsky, but he forgot about it. Medinsky is not someone you need to remember. That's the truth. And Medinsky's books, those books that supposedly need to be reread all the time, but in reality, Trump was just once again shown that Putin sends some strange people to negotiations and doesn't take the talk serious. What does that tell us? It means that sooner or later, if Putin is told directly, look, if you go to negotiations, no more Medinsky. From now on, only the key figures, the people who make decisions, and you personally, I won't accept anything else. There's no room left for maneuver, Dasha. You can't send Medinsky anymore. You can't send some random person from some unclear department or some advisor of yours. You can't. Only top-level representatives. And only you personally, where your signature is at the end on the peace agreement and so on. Because Putin was basically given an ultimatum, either a peace agreement with Zelenskyy within 50 days, or I'll tear you and your regime to pieces. That's all that was conveyed to him. As for Melania Trump, we need to urgently check if she has any Ukrainian roots. I feel like the person sitting there, I can just picture the scene. I don't even know which one, but I can clearly imagine it. Trump comes home, tired after work. He saw soccer for the first time there. He visited some stadium. He cut some ribbon. I don't know, drank some Coca-Cola, pressed the red button, and they brought him a Coke. The man is tired. He comes home, goes up to the second floor of the White House, comes home. Melania says, I had a wonderful conversation with Vladimir, with Putin. She says, can you imagine, Donald, they hit Kyiv, they hit Lutsk. So I think we finally found the person who knows the geography of Ukraine really well.
Sasha, if I'm not mistaken, Melania Trump is a close friend of Sasha Nikolaenko, Miss Ukraine, who is married to...
Who was at the inauguration?
Yes. And they even lived in the same room during the pageant. If I'm not mistaken, it was actually Melania Trump who introduced Alexandra Nikolaenko, a Ukrainian Miss Ukraine, to her future husband. And later, of course, her husband and business partner of Donald Trump. As I understand it, if Melania Trump has any affection for Ukraine, it's specifically because of Sasha Nikolaenko, since they're friends. And since Melania is European by origin, she should know European geography because she's not American. This is about how Trump fights against migrants, even though his wife isn't American and was born in Europe.
Well, you see, for example, I personally wouldn't have made that connection regarding Sasha Nikolenko. But if that's the case, then I want to tell you that Melania Trump and Trump himself basically have a daily review of the Ukrainian situation. And that's a good thing. If he has already said this directly, Dasha, it means that this information is reaching him. And that's also good. That's good, really.
Of course, we still need to discuss Putin's actions after all of this. You have conveyed the meaning of Dmitry Medvedev's post absolutely accurately, which ends with, "The world should expect the consequences of his policy. Europe was disappointed, but Russia didn't care." In other words, Russia doesn't care. That's what Medvedev stated. But here's the question. What will Putin do if Medvedev is saying that Russia didn't care, meaning they don't care about all these words from Trump and all his threats?
Putin does care. Putin will now spend the next 51 days trying to restore contact with Trump, but at the same time, he will continue striking Ukraine. These are two things that at first glance seem completely unrelated, but that's how it will be. In the end, nothing will work out for him. Listen, Trump negotiated with the Iranians for 60 days. He negotiated with the Iranians for 60 days. He talked to them. His representatives met with them. The media was telling everyone that he was putting pressure on Netanyahu. But in the end, it turned out that Mossad carried out 3 brilliant military special operations together with Israel's military intelligence. A month. Then it turned out that Trump gathered troops and struck Iran. Putin can do whatever he wants to do. But weapons have gone to Ukraine. And missiles will go to Russia, to Moscow, first and foremost. What is Vladimir Putin doing today, Dasha? Now, this is interesting. We're missing this. So, what is Vladimir Putin doing today? Let me tell you. Keith Kellogg, Trump's special representative on Ukraine and the general, has arrived in Kyiv. For a few days, they say maybe a week. We'll see. At the very moment he arrives in Kyiv, Russia launches a drone that first flies into Ukrainian territory, then turns, heads into Belarus, flies over Belarus, returns, and from Belarusian territory, supposedly, as if it were a Belarusian drone, flies into Ukraine to strike Chernihiv or Kyiv from the north, right? As Keith Kellogg is traveling to Kyiv. So it's obvious that Vladimir Putin wanted to provoke this situation and do everything possible to sever Lukashenko's ties with the Americans, with Trump, to break that connection. What does Lukashenko do? Attention! Out of the blue, Lukashenko scrambles a helicopter and destroys the drone at the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. What does this mean? What does this tell us? This shows that Vladimir Putin still wants to entangle Lukashenko in this war, to do everything so that Lukashenko is neutralized, to gain control over Belarus and send his army through Belarusian territory, to use Belarus as a staging ground, either against NATO forces in the east, actually, in the west, or directly for Putin himself, or directly against Ukraine from the north. But what we're talking about, Dasha, is that Vladimir Putin has clearly realized that Lukashenko is backing out, that Lukashenko is trying to distance himself, that Lukashenko doesn't want to be tied together with Putin right now, that Lukashenko has started actively flirting with Trump, and that Lukashenko has been promised something, and it's something very tempting. And Lukashenko doesn't want to lose sight of that tempting offer. He doesn't. And Putin really wants Lukashenko to break away from Trump. Did you notice? Here is one of the most important pieces of news that came from Trump apart from the topic of Ukraine during his speech in the Oval Office with Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General. It was as follows. The United States is directly influencing and was the party that reconciled, that began the process of reconciliation and drafting a peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In other words, Trump is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. America is taking the Caucasus away from Putin. So we were wondering, why is all this happening? Trump, that's why all this is happening. So attention, Dasha. Finland, Sweden, NATO bases. Petersburg is surrounded. NATO troops are practically at the gates of Petersburg. Soon there will be a border breakthrough. At the same time, British and French troops will be in Ukraine, along with troops from 28 other NATO member countries, after the beginning of the ceasefire, the so-called silence regime. Attention, there will be a Turkish NATO base in Azerbaijan, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian base in Gyumri, Armenia disappears, if Armenia shuts down all Russian bases on its territory. What do I think? I think that Vladimir Putin, who has clearly realized that he won't be able to get Ukraine no matter how hard he tries, now wants to prolong the war. But it's one thing when you play to deplete Ukraine's reserves and resources, and another thing when you play to deplete America's reserves and resources. They are not comparable. You have far fewer resources, and you will lose this war if Trump gets involved. And he turned on. Therefore, he will look for other opportunities for himself. I think there are two options to consider, three options. The first option is a full-scale attempt to occupy Belarus and to destroy the Lukashenko regime and Lukashenko himself. The second is a direct attempt to undermine Armenia, and possibly even an attempt to occupy Armenia. And the third AT and the third scenario is the start of a campaign, a military campaign against Georgia. I think in the near future, we may witness these very scenarios. Putin will choose one of these scenarios for himself because the population, the plebs, need something to be shown on television. And this is what they will be showing now.
Sasha, a quick off-topic note. There's an entire piece out about Melania Trump. As they say, we're at the forefront. There's a big article in the Times. Zelenskyy has gained an unexpected ally in the White House, Melania Trump. According to the publication, she actively reminds Trump about the victims of Russian strikes. In February 2022, she publicly called the killing of peaceful Ukrainians horrible and tragic, the murders of peaceful Ukrainians. While Trump called Putin smart and brilliant, Melania called him a fiend. She constantly appealed to her followers to help Ukraine and has much more political influence over her husband than previously thought. It is noted that despite the presence of numerous security and foreign policy advisors, her voice can be decisive. Trump listens to certain people, especially those close to him, and even more so if their last name is Trump. Sasha, what do you think?
I'll say that we've gained an unexpected ally. No one saw this coming. We've gained an unexpected ally. And that's actually good news, Dasha. And, it's actually very nice because for a long time, Ukraine was looking for ways, approaches to convince Trump. And it turned out there was no need to look that hard. It turned out that there's the first lady who can, bypassing everyone else, come directly and say, Donald, it's time to be done with Volodya Putin. End it with him. I don't like him. And as it turns out, that's enough for Trump. That's much more than all the negotiations with Putin, more than any persuasion from the Senate, Congress, and so on, more than Elon Musk, who's half crazy. It turned out that Melania Trump alone is quite enough. That's very good news for Ukraine, Dasha. Really. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know what level of influence she'll have, how she will continue to support or not support Ukraine. But as things stand today, if thanks to Melania Trump, Ukraine receives deadly missiles, protection, full protection of Ukrainian airspace, 17 Patriots and even Tomahawk missiles, she should have a monument erected to her in the center of Kyiv and a street named after Melania Trump.
Yes, you're right, Sasha. And most importantly, you always say that Putin did certain things with his underwear and slapped Trump across the face with it. And The Atlantic completely agrees with you because The Atlantic also wrote about the reasons for the increased US aid to Ukraine. Putin officially humiliated Trump, just outright humiliated him, and Trump can't get over it. Here you go, a public humiliation.
I think, by the way, Melania told Trump about this too. Listen, he's just humiliating you. And that was the end of it, you see? And then things started moving, Dasha. Here we are, talking and talking. Things are starting to move. So what's the conclusion? The action has begun. They wanted action. They can't live without it. Well, here you go. Get your action. Take it.
Look, news is breaking. And while we're streaming, Germany might buy a Typhoon launcher from the US to launch Tomahawk missiles. So as I understand it, Tomahawks have become our new buzzword now. Now, that's all we talk about.
So, Dash, so what does this indicate? It indicates that Trump has broken loose. Now he's going to blackmail Putin every single day. Remember, Solovyov was recently shouting about 2 Poseidons that would drown America with a nuclear wave. Just a few days ago, Solovyov was shouting about this. America doesn't need any Solovyov. They've got Trump. Now, Trump has more different kinds of weapons than Russia does. Now, Trump will tell absolutely everyone in the world every day about the best, the most powerful weapon systems and how Russia will burn with the help of these weapon systems. And now imagine 50 days of this targeted informational bombardment of the Kremlin, the Medvedevs, and everyone else. there's a very good chance that even before these crucial 50 days are completely up, someone within the Kremlin will ultimately throw in the towel. Because, well, such an information attack, they're unlikely to withstand it, honestly. They'll probably lose it sooner.
Sasha, to sum up, what do you think will happen in Europe? Right now, Germany is being called Ukraine's main ally because almost all the supplies will go through Germany. That's very important. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has also done a lot. But Europe still isn't voting on the new 18th package of sanctions. Once again, Fico is in a frenzy, Orban and others too, and now even Malta has joined in. Basically, Russian enclaves in Europe. What should we do? And will oil prices finally go down?
Trump will deal with these guys if Putin really pushes him to the end. Because if anyone has direct influence over Orban and Fico, it's Trump. Moreover, if he turns a blind eye to certain things, the European Union will put the squeeze on them. When Germany stops, for example, supplying cars from Hungary, Orban will raise the white flag and say, I agree to everything. This has already happened when he was blackmailed with cars, with automobiles. He immediately made all the necessary pro-Ukrainian decisions. You remember that situation, right? When former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz told him to take a walk in the hallway while the vote was going on. He'll be taking more walks if necessary. You know, Dasha, a lot has changed in the last few days. The board has been flipped over. We still don't fully realize that this is a new stage in the war. And this stage is clearly not in Vladimir Putin's favor. A lot has changed. So much has changed. The pace is just insane, a terrifying pace. There was only this kind of pace at the very beginning of the big war, at the start of the invasion, probably in the first 6 months to a year. What we're seeing now is a new momentum. Everyone was hoping there would be some kind of reconciliation. There was hope. Trump probably had hope too. Or maybe not hope, but an illusion he probably had that as well. Or the thought that he could make a deal with Putin. That there would be a deal and in fact he could even profit from Russia. The deal is over. The illusions are over. And now there's a new momentum. Trump probably enjoyed going to war. Trump probably liked the image of Moscow burning. I don't know how long that image will stay in his mind. Maybe a day, maybe 2 weeks, maybe 2 years, I don't know. But that he'll take it out on Putin, that's 100% certain. What will happen in Russia now? Flames. What will happen in America now? A desire to start those flames. What will happen in Europe now? A desire to help start those flames. What will happen in Ukraine now? A new momentum, a new hope that Vladimir Putin's regime will finally collapse. And I'm incredibly glad about that because I repeat every single time, freedom and hope are the last things Vladimir Putin can try to take from us, but he will never succeed.
Wonderful ending, dear audience. Sasha and I work for you in the Dasha plus Sasha plus Dasha format twice a week. Write a few kind words in support of our tandem. I know you leave a lot of different comments. I read them and give them hearts. So thank you very much. Let us know where you're watching from. Share your location in the comments. Every Tuesday, Sunday, Wednesday, and Monday, we are on my YouTube channel, Dasha Shastrivaya, and on Dmitry Gordon's YouTube channel with top analyst Alexandra Demchenko. Sasha, thank you so much, and see you already this weekend.
Until next time. Bye.